Shiamiyo, yabiyo, shiamiyo, yabiyo, yabiyo, shiamiya, 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 awa, 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 awa. Shiamiyo, yabiyo, shiamiyo, yabiyo, yabiyo, shiamiya. Shiamiya, shiamiya, awa, 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 awa,
I hesitate to say Indian spirituality. When you're saying spirituality encompasses all things, good and bad, positive, negative, whatever it might be. The Spirit embraces all things, and we walk the spiritual path. And it happened that we had knowledge of a supreme being long before the Bible or the churches came to us. We had a connection with the great Creator. And in my particular tribe, which is the Muskogee Creek, we refer to him as Ofunga, the one that looks over all of life.
Northeastern Siberia has long been a desolate land where hunters, fishermen and gatherers have struggled to scratch out a living from their meager surroundings. Some 30 to 40,000 years ago, some Siberians decided to seek a more prosperous life, so they traversed the frozen Bering Strait into the Western Hemisphere. Those who stayed behind became the peoples of Mongolia, and those who emigrated became the first Native Americans.
And one day he asked me, he said, "Say, Paris," he said, "what did your people call an elephant?" So I told him, "Wakanda Basnidi." God was a long nose. Then he said, "What do they call a lion?" A hairy forefront. And he said, "What do you call a tiger?" Pusimotana, wildcat. Then he said, "What do you call monkey?" So now he's the one that got me to thinking. He said, "You know that," he called him mammoth, the mastodon, I think another name he gave him. He said, that here a while back, he said they dug up his bones, found his bones somewhere, dug it up, and they said he'd been dead for 10,000 years. When he died, it had been 10,000 years ago that he died. So if you got named for him, he said, you must have been here. If you guys called him, you know, God was long-nosed, and he must have been alive 10,000 years before that, before he got extinct. So you must have been here at least 20,000 years. And that kind of opened up something in my mind. It's really interesting about us Indians.
Like others living far to the north, the pre-Mongoloid peoples had adapted well to their frigid, barren environment. Along with others from North Asia and North Europe, they had developed what scholars have called a circumpolar culture. These circumpolar cultures shared religious beliefs that satisfied the spiritual needs associated with their harsh existence. Theirs was a miraculous world of supernatural spirits who controlled a threatening natural reality. Unlike most European religions, circumpolar religion was an experienced reality beyond the normal senses, with its own rituals and narrative myths. After the ancient Siberian peoples crossed the Alaskan Bridge, they then spread south and east along the ice-free corridors over many thousands of years. We don't know much detail about the order in which they migrated, but they do seem to have traveled in at least 3 great waves. The first wave consisted of peoples known to linguists as the Amerindians, a term that describes both the people and their language. Most American natives belong to this group, which traveled to the southern tip of South America by about 9,000 BCE. The second linguistic family were the Na-Dene, which included various tribes who settled along the northwest coast, and the Athapascan tribes of the western Canadian mainland. The Na-Dene may have arrived about 7,000 BCE. The third invasion was that of the Eskimo and Aleut, who came to the Americas about 5,000 years ago. Animal ceremonialism and belief in the master of animals were perhaps the most remarkable features of circumpolar religion.
In difference to Christianity, we don't see any superiority for mankind. And we see no humans have been touched by a divinity that would make them exalted over a deer or a bear or anything else that's living. We just don't think that humans have a special place in the circle of life on Mother Earth. We think everything is equal.
But there also were localized cults dedicated to some sacred place. Still other cults were dedicated to a particular concept of cosmic order. And, as in other native cultures throughout the world, the circumpolar cultures believed in ecstatic medicine men, or shamans.
A medicine man or a medicine woman knows about music. He knows about philosophy, art, history, and religion. And if one of these was taken out, the other would be meaningless.
Medicine men were far more common than medicine women, and they were believed to derive their blessings from one or several spirits, known for diverse supernatural capacities. Shaman is a Tungus word, meaning inspired medicine man. He is an ecstatic visionary whose role is to mediate relations between his social group and the supernatural powers. Often the shaman dispatches either his own soul or his guardian spirit to retrieve a sick person's soul from the realm of the dead. The shaman often used his spiritual techniques to expel diseases, which themselves were believed to be caused by evil spirits. With most diseases or injuries, the shaman would attempt to drive out the evil spirit by dancing himself into an ecstatic frenzy, sometimes shaking a so-called devil stick while he danced. One of the most interesting of these curing dances involved a carved, human-shaped devil doll, sometimes clothed in caribou skin. The doll was animated. It was believed to come to life and run around when people were fast asleep.
My dad and my grandpa, it's maybe about 2 or 4 generations. If you're raised from a medicine, like my grandpa's side and my dad's side, so they were both medicine men. So my mom and my grandpa want me to become a medicine man in the future. That's why they start talking about, they got together, and that's how they picked me, you know. So, cause the way my grandpa used to, there's like, the medicine men are very special people, just because if we weren't like that, everybody could be a medicine man. But today it's different. So, things like that, you know. Yeah, in these songs, Apache song we sing, it's all, they tell a story. Some are, like when I sang a while ago, it's a prayer song, it's a prayer in there. But just for like a social song, it's different. See, like a young person, maybe 10-year-old, if he start dreaming about the medicine world, he'll be hearing some songs. And he tell him, when this happens, don't tell everybody. Just let me know, because you teach him, you know, because he hurt you. So then you give him advice. You're going to be learning a lot of different songs, and you're going to, the guy they're talking to you will tell you what kind of song he's singing. If it's going to be a horse song, he'll tell you. Or it's going to be a crown song, he'll tell you. But don't mention to anybody till in the future, maybe within about six or 1 year time. And then you dream, in your dream, now go out in the world and start singing and talk about it, then you're going to keep it. But as soon as you dream about this song, you tell the next day you tell somebody, I dreamed about this, and disappear, and it won't come back.
Athapascan shamanism shared many, but not all, of the basic ideas of other circumpolar peoples. The Tanaina, for instance, believed in a highest god who lived in the North Star and traveled around the sky. In times of need, the Tenaina people raised their right arms and appealed to this highest god for food or other needs. They believed that at death, a person's breath rises up into the sky and that his or her shadow spirit remains for a time before disappearing into the underground. This concept of two souls in one body was common among both American and North Eurasian tribes. Algonquian religion in the eastern regions of North America was strongly reminiscent of circumpolar religions in Arctic Europe and Asia. All of these religious traditions featured a pronounced belief in a high god, atmospheric gods, and masters of the game. They had similar ideas about the afterlife and about the structure of this world. The Algonquians affirmed a mighty supreme being surrounded by thunder gods, usually represented as thunder birds. There also were wind gods. The Algonquians had a cult of the Earth Mother, and they had clear conceptions of their journey to the land of the dead. Totemism appeared in America in virtually every large tribal group that was divided into subdivisions or clans. Each clan had its own animal design or guardian, such as a deer. The Ojibwe believed that a clan animal also could be a person's guardian spirit, whom he had achieved in a dream or vision. Thus, the clan animal would reveal the whereabouts of game. The master of life who supervised man and his actions was known to the Ojibwe as Kichi Manitou, which means great Manitou or great spirit. The word Manitou stands for everything that is supernatural or spiritual. The Cree, another Algonquian tribe, called the high god simply Manitou. At times he also was identified with the master of the game, the Caribou spirit. Like many other Native American tribes, the Ojibwe worshipped the Earth Mother. She was thought to reside in trees, shrubs, and stones. She was an important spiritual force and received tobacco pouch offerings. Mother Earth's power to heal, and to grow vegetation was recognized everywhere in America.
With those ideas were certain ideas about the universe that we live in. How do we stay well? What is our relationship to those things out there, like the sky, the plants, the insects? And there were very specific teachings that are still existent today. And they're still useful to us. They still can guide us. And those ideas were connected to ideas of staying well. And ideas of staying well were connected to ideas of behavior, things that we ought to do for ourselves to maintain physical health or mental health. And so those ideas were connected to ideas of ceremonial life or rituals. So it was all connected like that.
The Midewiwin erected ceremonial lodges that were intended to symbolically replicate the universe. Among their most important ritual ceremonies were initiation rites, which candidates had to pass in order to attain competence as medicine men and women. They learned the lore of the tribe by studying botany, creation myths, ceremonial requirements, and so on. After this course of study, the candidate submitted to a death and revival ritual. A priest would figuratively shoot a white clamshell into the candidate's body by touching him with a medicine bundle. The candidate would feign death, and in this state he would have a vision that was believed to give him power and a sacred song.
This is the songs for a prayer. If you travel anywhere, the Lord will bless you, and He protect you wherever you go.
The early Ojibwe and their Algonquian neighbors believed in life after death. The deceased can reach the afterlife by following a path to a river and walking across the river on a slippery log. In time, as Christianity influenced their ideas, the Native Americans came to believe in not only a blissful paradise for the good, but also a hell for the bad. Many Native American religious beliefs and practices originated in the hunting cultures of circumpolar Asia, but Asia's circumpolar fishing cultures also shaped life in the New World, especially along the coast of the northern Pacific. We can see the influence of circumpolar fishing cultures most clearly in the specialized Arctic culture of the Eskimo and also in the native cultures along the northwest Pacific coast. Eskimo culture developed as a response to conditions in the cold north. Long-distance transportation was usually by kayak and umiyak, a large open boat used by women. Eskimos hunted with harpoons and lived in igloos. Their religion is often gloomy. It mirrors the devastating natural power of the Arctic, where the environment is tricky, capricious, overwhelming, and often dangerous. Yet neither nature nor religion could diminish the Eskimos' cheerful outlook. When Eskimo fishermen committed crimes against the animals or violated other taboos, the sea animals were believed to become unclean, to feel pain and to disappear. By extension, the goddess Sedna, for whom the sea creatures were said to be her fingers, was believed to also grow unclean and feel pain. With the food supply disappearing, the Eskimo would be threatened by starvation. So their shaman would send his soul down to the bottom of the sea to comb the dirt from Sedna's hair. Indeed, many circumpolar peoples clearly distinguished between land animals and sea animals, and they also distinguished between the supernatural beings who guarded them. In Alaska, the whale was considered to be a sacred being, and this huge sea mammal was revered by its own cult. Whale hunters had to experience a whale vision in which they received songs to sing during their hunting expeditions. Traveling east from America's northwest coast, one soon reaches the Great Plateau on the western side of the Rocky Mountain Range. Here the fishing culture merged with both hunting and seed-collecting cultures. In this combined culture, two interesting rituals took place. The first was the salmon ceremony, and the second was the vision quest for power. This was a puberty rite typically undertaken by young boys in order to begin their communications with the spirit world. Sometimes vision quest rituals could continue for years. An especially intense version might include visions induced by fasting, prayer, and other means. These and similar rituals continued until the young boy dreamed of some animal or bird. The animal or bird thus became assigned to him as his guardian spirit, to whom he could pray. The boy would then paint his face with designs to symbolize the guardian spirit as seen in the dream. A part of the skin from the species of the guardian spirit was kept in a bag, made from another guardian spirit animal.
A vision quest is not, the spirit has already been there. They're just made aware of it. On the vision quest, they are aware that there are certain forces that are around. It's not necessarily looking for an apparition like a ghost or a spirit. It is a connection, a communication with the higher powers and higher knowledge and how they bestow certain things to you. As my job of being sponsor of a certain questee, it is my role to interpret these for them. He came prepared as a paper tribe. He had all kinds of notebooks. And when he came back, he had everything written down. But there was one thing that he kept referring to. As much as he wanted to not see that, it was in his line of vision from his vision quest spot, and that was one blade of grass. And he looked this way, and I guess he was really looking for a great vision somewhere, and yet he would always return to that blade of grass. And so I said, that is your power sign, the blade of grass. So what? Yeah, I said, yes, the blade of grass. you were thinking high, you were thinking great, you were thinking of a great bear, a great wolf, or a buffalo, or an eagle, or something. What the spirits are doing is that you have a semblance of an exaggerated self-importance. And because of that, you're looking for these great things to happen, and it brought you down, I said, to consider a blade of grass. So that what you find in life to do, you will think a door is slammed right in your face for your endeavor. And yet after that particular situation over, you're still standing. So you try again. Maybe you are not ready for it. And so accept it. And you keep trying. The ability to stand, keep standing in spite of all setbacks and whatever it might be. You can take and give an offering and say thank you to the Earth Mother.
Indeed, there are many similarities among religions found throughout North and South America. As Native American culture had evolved through the millennia, many characteristics of the first hunting religions survived. The question of whether the Native Americans developed their agricultural society with or without Old World influence has been highly controversial. There were many opportunities for agriculture to evolve independently in America. Scholars have hypothesized that Native American women, who typically were responsible for collecting seeds, herbs, nuts, and bulbs, discovered how to arrange their plants in a nearby garden. Women became great contributors to the early economic history by planting maize, or what we now call corn, in North America, Central America, and the Andes Mountains of South America. Agricultural societies in both the Old World and the New World elevated the importance of the crop in their religious beliefs. It became common to ascribe human characteristics to crops or animals, a practice called anthropomorphism. Just as the hunting cultures had practiced rites and feasts of thanksgiving to celebrate a good hunt, so the plant cultivators now practiced fertility rites. Planting, sprouting, sowing and harvesting now became occasions for celebration and worship. Agricultural societies usually developed a festival calendar organized around the crop cycle, and this calendar sometimes became so eventful that virtually the whole year was encircled by festive religious ceremonies. Native American religious life in general was characterized by its ceremonialism, where even a single step could take on a symbolic importance. Native ceremonies have therefore been called dances. The North American natives known as the Iroquois were a confederacy of the leading tribes in the northeast portions of North America. They lived south and east of Lake Ontario, not far from the Algonquians. This area is now New York State. The Iroquois were comprised of the so-called Five Nations: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes. All of these tribes were expert in war and in peaceful political organization as well. Living in an area of plentiful hardwood trees, they erected long houses and palisades surrounded by farmlands. The men fished, caught birds, and killed deer, Women cleared the land, then planted and harvested maize, beans, and squash. Iroquois religion reflected the prominence of women in the economy. The creation myth of the Iroquois emphasized the role of the great goddess. This was not a supreme being, but she cared about the women and their work in the home and agricultural fields. Farmlands. The men fished, caught birds, and killed deer. Women cleared the land, then planted and harvested maize, beans, and squash. Iroquois religion reflected the prominence of women in the economy. The creation myth of the Iroquois emphasized the role of the great goddess. This was not a supreme being, but she cared about the women and their work in the home and agricultural fields. The great goddess also made the crops grow. The Iroquois believed a male supernatural was responsible for the growth of the crops. This was the thunderer who brought rain. Prayers were directed to the thunderer when planting the seeds, and later in the fall after the harvest. The Iroquois growing season would begin in April, commencing a cycle of hard work and religious festivities. The Maple Festival was held when the sap runs during very early spring. At this festival, the people would offer thanks and tobacco to the Supreme Being, to the maple, and to the forest. Also in spring, they planted the three sisters of maize, beans, and squashes. In the winter, before another year's rituals would begin, the Iroquois would humbly confess their ritual transgressions. A New Year's celebration was held for 7 days in February, when the Pleiades constellation hovered directly overhead at dusk. The ceremony was introduced by 2 heralds, or so-called big heads, in animal disguises, thus echoing the New Year's rites of hunting tribes. The heralds would admonish people to report their dreams or risk falling ill. Dreams were then presented in the form of a riddle. Others in the tribe would have to guess the dreams, and a correct answer caused great joy among the people. The Iroquois tribes used the New Year festival to extinguish old fires and light new ones. Though the Iroquois were primarily an agricultural society, they had a number of spirits who were closely connected with hunting and with the expansive woodlands that surrounded them. Many of them were seen in visions. Unseen little people in the woodlands were believed to watch over the Iroquois, and with their tiny bows and arrows, they were thought to take any game they desired. The Iroquois also believed in another group of woodland spirits, called the False Faces, who had contorted faces with no bodies. These spirits were so frightening that anyone looking upon them became paralyzed and even risked death. The Iroquois False Face Society was composed of people who had dreamed of the false faces while they were ill. The society cured them by sprinkling hot ashes over their bodies. After recovery, the patient joined the society, occasionally donning a wooden mask to portray a particular false face spirit. We can see a gradual development from the date of the earliest cultivation of pumpkins in about 7000 BCE to the cultivation of maize beginning sometime between 5000 and 2500 BCE. The Mesoamerican cultural tradition then gradually developed, and the first advanced culture, or high culture, formed in about 2000 BCE. Villages now began to be assimilated into larger territorial units. Capital cities emerged. Ceremonial centers sprang up. First, they were flat-topped pyramids, then pyramids capped with temples and palaces. Symbolic clay figurines represented fertility goddesses and rain gods. A feathered serpent god showed up in works of art. We might call this era the pre-classic period, and it occurred from 1000 BCE to 200 CE. Offshoots from this pre-classic stage of Mesoamerican development can be seen in the Pueblo cultures of the Southwest and in the cultures of the Mississippi Valley. Next came the classic Mesoamerican era, which lasted from 200 CE to 900 CE. The Maya religion in what is now southern Mexico and Guatemala was a prime example of a classic Mesoamerican culture. A very powerful Mayan divinity was the destructive god of death. This god was depicted with a skull as his face and his skeleton protruding from his rotten body. With his band of demons, the god of death resided in the 9th or lowest underworld. This was a realm of hunger, cold and sorrow, where bad people went after death. Good people, on the other hand, assembled in a heavenly paradise. Among them were warriors who'd fallen in battle, women who died in childbirth, and those who had committed suicide. Many sick Mayans took their own lives so that they might go to this wonderful land. The cult rested entirely in the hands of the priests. Their offerings included animals, vegetables, flowers, and feathers from the beautiful Quetzal bird. When wars began to afflict the Mayan nation, human beings came to be sacrificed as well. In about 1325 CE, the Aztec kingdom was established in the Valley of Mexico, and this marked the beginning of the post-classic period. The Aztec priests acknowledged a kind of high god, but the popular gods included no supreme being. The supreme being thus remained a vague entity, and a number of popular deities vied for the role. One potential supreme being was the tribal god Huitzilopochtli, who was believed to have protected the people during their invasion of what is now Mexico City. Huitzilopochtli appeared in visions as an eagle fighting a snake, a widely cherished mythological theme that symbolized the dualism between the powers above and the powers below. Huitzilopochtli was also a sun god and the god of the warriors, but there were other sun gods as well. When the Aztecs conquered the central Mexican plateau, they appropriated the area's gods, including Quetzalcoatl, a god with a shroud of colorful Quetzal bird feathers. Quetzalcoatl served as a culture hero, royal ancestor, and god of the priests. Like other gods, he was believed to be connected with the star world. He was Venus, the evening star who reappeared as the morning star. Most of the Aztecs' indigenous gods were fertility gods. The Great Mother Earth was the mother of gods and of human beings. She was partly represented as a snake, and she devoured any dirt caused by human sins that had been confessed to her. There also was Tlaloc, the foremost god of agriculture and the rain god responsible for gathering the clouds. During droughts, the Aztec people would sacrifice children to appease him. One Aztec god of vegetation was called Our Flayed Lord. His body was said to be covered with the skin of a sacrificed person, representing the new covering of vegetation in the spring. To the Spanish conquistadors, the Aztec priests were dirty, repulsive individuals who smelled like the dried sacrificial blood that smeared their bodies. Their ears were pierced here and there from the bloodlettings they made as offerings to the gods. The most impressive of the priestly cult scenes was the Great Temple in present-day Mexico City, which they dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. During the inauguration of the Great Temple in 1487, they sacrificed no less than 20,000 prisoners of war. When the Spaniards and the Indians were at peace, the Aztec king Moctezuma had shown the Spanish leader Hernan Cortez around the temple. The king had personally killed some prisoners as a sacrifice just that morning, and he said he felt uplifted after he had committed the act. He explained to Cortez that if human sacrifice was stopped, the Aztec world order would collapse. Aztec beliefs about the dead were similar to those of the Maya. Throughout Central American high cultures, social rank and manner of death were thought to determine a person's destination in the afterlife. The good people thus were simply those who lived a socially acceptable life. The Pueblo culture owed its formation to early influences from the general pre-classic culture in Mexico. The Southwest Indians, in about 2000 BCE, began to change from seed gatherers to agriculturalists. Their adobe homes, called pueblos, each had several stories built on multiple terraced levels. They planted gardens along nearby riverbanks to permit effective irrigation. Many of their prayers and rituals focused on the need for adequate rain and moisture in a desert environment. As with Mexican high culture, Pueblo agriculture was primarily a man's job, although women helped to plant maize, squash, beans, pumpkins, and tobacco. Though hunting and gathering have sometimes been highly important to the Pueblo economy, agricultural products have been their staple food. The Pueblos have had probably the most secretive culture in North America, though Native Americans in general have never accepted strangers at their religious rituals. They believe that the sacred mystery evaporates in the face of non-understanding outsiders. Western and Eastern Pueblo peoples have followed different socio-political patterns. In the West, the Zuni and Hopi peoples were divided into clans that were matrilineal, with ancestral relations following the mother's line. Houses and cornfields were and are owned by the women. On the other hand, the Rio Grande Pueblos in the east split their villages into patrilineal moieties. These tribes were thus split into roughly equal parts, each tracing descent through the father. The Zuni tribe in the west, who live near the modern boundary of New Mexico and Arizona, stand out as a society of remarkable complexity. Like all Pueblo people, the Zuni have always been conservative. Their Pueblo lies on a site they've occupied since about 700 CE.
This one here, the circle, that represents the center.
And their rituals have changed little over the centuries. All Zuni ceremonies are integrated by a special Zuni understanding of the symbolism of the universe.
The sky is male and the earth is female. The air and the sunlight is male, the earth and water is female. So we are a product of our mother and father. And every time we step, every step that we place on the earth, there is great love, there is affection, and there is healing that we receive from our mother. Every time we breathe in, every time we go into the sunlight, we observe the same thing from our father. And so this is how we are here on this earth. And the ceremony takes these into account. We are sitting in a hogan. The floor at the hogan is dirt or soil. When we sit in a hogan and have a ceremony done, we touch the earth. Why? Because that's our mother. There is healing power in our mother. There is great affection and love. We need that. And every time we breathe in, we breathe the same thing in from our father. And so, and the other universe, the energy, the force, is with very ceremony. So we are put back into perspective by our mother and our father. And we are healed. And when we are healed, it restores our courage, our confidence, and this is our belief. And so this is what we mean in the Native American, that we live in harmony with nature.
Before about 1700 CE, several corn farming villages on the western plains combined farming with limited hunting. Among them was the Pawnee tribe in what is now Nebraska. Pawnee culture was rather peculiar, drawing its traditions from both the east and the southwest. The Pawnee established what we might call a prairie religion. This was an agricultural religion adapted to the long grass prairies, with corn rites, dancing fraternities, and near-sacred chiefs. Their religion was partly descended from the religions of Mexico. Each spring, they sacrificed a captive virgin to the morning star, shooting her with arrows on a scaffold. In the 18th century, nomads from the Algonquin and Sioux tribes of the north arrived on the plains. They had been driven from their traditional hunting grounds by the expansion of the European colonial settlers. The cultural accessories of the Algonquians and Sioux included the teepee. They also had acquired the horse and the gun from the white man. Now these new immigrants fought and traded with the more settled tribes like the Pawnee. The fusion of these cultures produced the colorful plains culture, and it dominated the western regions of North America for a little more than 100 years, between about 1750 and 1880. It was the last of the great independent Native American cultures. In midsummer of 1832, the famous painter George Catlin vividly experienced scenes from a so-called medicine lodge among the Mandan people, a branch of the Sioux tribes. According to Catlin, the Mandan ceremony had 3 acts. First, there was a ritual celebrating the disappearance of the Great Flood, which the Mandan believed to be the beginning of human existence. Second, a bull dance was aimed at providing buffalo for the future. And third, male youths of the tribe were invited to become men and warriors. Catlin described how Mandan adolescents were hardened through torture on the 4th and last day of the rite, when candidates were already weakened from lack of food, drink, and sleep.
In the 4 days of the Sundance, we have been taught that you are there to sacrifice yourself to gain the understanding of this circle of life. And so we stand there for 4 days and we sacrifice the only thing that is meaningful to us, and that's some of our blood, some of our sweat, and the fact that we deprive ourselves of the worldly pleasures during those 8 days. So we don't consider it torture. Torture is what you do to an enemy.
Now, near the turn of the 21st century, the sun dance is still practiced by the Plains Indians on the reservations. They endure 3 to 4 days of fasting. They dance, pray, and receive blessings from the tribe's medicine man. Native American religious practice has changed greatly with modern times. While many members of old native traditions have assimilated into the surrounding culture, those that remain struggle to preserve the things that have given meaning to so many generations of their ancestors. As with modern religious life in general, how far they will succeed remains to be seen.
The world needs to understand the philosophy of natural people, whether it's Indian or African or Asian or European. That philosophy of natural interrelatedness is what we want to give the world. But nobody should invade the ceremonies of another tribe and think that they're going to be able to understand and know that tribe by looking at those ceremonies, because it just won't work.
Even in today's time, these teachings are still alive and they're still very valuable to us. It's unfortunate that Many of our people have felt that they had to make a choice.